Googled something, and it said, oops, to stand in the gap. You've heard that phrase? It says to stand in the gap, also found in idioms to expose oneself for the protection of something, to make defense against an assailing danger, or to take the place of a fallen comrade or supporter. Anybody know the history of that phrase, stand in the gap? Let me read it for you. This is from Ezekiel 22, verse 20. This is the Lord speaking. I looked for a man among them who would build the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so that I would not have to destroy it, but I found none. I got to thinking back about the time that there's a gap between God says this is going to happen and when it finally happens. The first one that came to my mind actually was Moses. He said, Moses, I'm going to send you back. You're going to deliver people. All right. Well, he didn't get that at first. Not me. I stuttered. My brother, that kind of thing. Then he goes back to Egypt. And he says, let my people go. Right? And it got worse. And worse. Over a period of about a year. But what was happening during that year? What was happening during that year was God's grace of provision for his people, because at the end of that year, Egypt opened her treasure chest and said, here you go. Why don't you get out of here? This is about to kill us. And they got free. But also during that year, these people had not seen God, but they'd seen the gods of Egypt. And it looked like the gods of Egypt were prospering, and their God was nowhere in town. But each month, one plague after another, the gods of Egypt, you believe in God of the Nile? You believe in the sun god? Turn the lights off? Eat that year. When there's a gap, there's always a purpose in that. Why did God give Nineveh 40 days? Did you ever think about that? It says, Jonah wants you to preach against Nineveh. By the way, Nineveh was historically recorded a vicious people. They destroy a city and they cut people's heads off and stack it like a pyramid in the city gate. Say, that's what happens when we come to die. They had done that to Jonah's people. And God told Jonah, I want you to go preach in Nineveh. That's why he said, I'm going the other direction. Right? And he goes and he preaches. 40 days. Why did God say 40 days? Well, what happened in the 40 days? God's message was, I'm going to destroy the city. But what happened in 40 days? They turned around. And they repented, much to Jonah's chagrin. He says, I knew you were going to do that. That's why I didn't want to come. And that's one of the stories in the Bible that never ends. It doesn't tell you the end of the story. Because what Jonah did after the story is over, that's not the point. The point is, God had declared a gap between pronouncement and the boom falling. But what he looked for in Ezekiel, what did he say? Behold, I looked for someone to stand in the gap before me so that I would not have to destroy the land. When God speaks of judgment, his judgment isn't, his goal is not judgment, but to call people to repentance so he doesn't have to judge. And that's why I said in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name will do what? Humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways to seek my face, I'll forgive their sins and heal their land. God is not into judgment. God's into redemption. So when he speaks the word of judgment, sometimes he raises up people to stand in the gap between when he says, you're over the line, and when he actually brings it. In some cases, it's for the purpose of the people crying out, saying, we're sorry. The king of Nineveh, when he found out about it, sackcloth and ashes, he declared that the whole city should fast and pray, if perhaps, it wasn't a guarantee, if perhaps God would, this is a pagan city, and they hear Jonah, who was an unrepentant prophet. He was a reluctant prophet. It wasn't about Jonah. It was about God's desire, and he doesn't care who he sends, or even how it's spoken. But his desire is that it be spoken and be heard. But during that gap, God wants to raise up people in a gap. Touched on Esther last week. It's kind of still been in my head. And when Haman, who is a wicked, wicked man, gets really, really angry because Mordecai, this Jew, wouldn't bow down to him when he'd get paraded down the street, and he decided not only is he going to kill Mordecai, the Jew, go kill all his people, but when he cast the dice, it was in the first year, when he cast the dice and when he should do that, it came up 12. You can roll the dice, but God loads them. There was a year there. It's during that year that this unfolds, that Haman has a plan and he wants to undo things. And you have this history just kind of unfolding. Here's the most powerful nation in the world. And the king has thrown a 6 months party, celebration of how wonderful things are. The last week it was a week-long banquet. This was over the top. It says everyone had a goblet that was different than anybody, gold goblet that was different than anybody else's. And during this banquet, he goes out and says, get the queen, Vashti, to come in, and I want to show her off. She's beautiful. She said, I ain't doing it. Well, all his nobles said, King, you got a problem. Because if the word gets out to our wives that your wife said she's not coming, we're going to be in trouble at home. You got to do something about this thing. So that's when the king put Vashti aside and decided to gather his attendants, give this advice, gather all the beautiful young virgins of the country, and you can take your pick. Well, Esther found favor with the eunuch who was in charge of her care. She gets a front seat in this whole process here. She didn't look for that position. She never believed that she would ever be in that position. And when she was in that position, she hadn't volunteered for nothing. As a matter of fact, when Mordecai gets the decree and finds out, he starts parading back and forth in front of the king's gate. He couldn't go inside, but in sackcloth, and I said he wailed out loud. Made a racket. And Esther finds out, they said, your uncle's out there. And she sends you out, said, with some clothes. He wouldn't take them. They go back and say, you won't take them. Ask him what he's crying about. Here she's at the palace. She's safe from all this other stuff. She hadn't even heard the decree. Mordecai tells her the decree. And the part of the decree was this guy named Haman would pay 375 tons of silver to exterminate the Jews. Of course, he's going to get that from the Jews they exterminated. And he says, now, before, when she was a little girl, by the way, Esther is a Persian name. Hadassah was her Jewish name. Nobody knew her as Hadassah. She was Persian, under the radar. It's okay to be under the radar when you need to be under the radar. But now Mordecai says, now you've got to tell people. You can't be quiet. And so he tells you, you got to go to the king and plead with him on behalf of you and your people. And then she said, okay, Mordecai, you know the rule here. If you go in the king's presence and he doesn't hold out his scepter, you're dead. If he doesn't summon you, you don't walk in his chamber. And Mordecai, that famous verse that so many of us have heard, he says, who knows, but for such a time as this, you have been raised up. And I would say, given your position in the kingdom, let's translate that here. Who knows but what God has given you, your position in the kingdom for such a time as this. So he was talking just a little while ago about feeling useless or worthless or whatever it may be, or sometimes even lonely by ourselves. Who knows? But what for such a time as this, God has raised you up. God doesn't give time with no purpose. Let me say it again. God doesn't give time with no purpose. If God has given you time, there's a purpose. However many years you have, there's a purpose for those years. And don't look to your history as the fulfillment of that purpose. It was your purpose up until today. If you're alive today, then there's still a purpose today. He doesn't give time without a purpose. God's very careful. Read all through Scriptures. God's very careful about days and years and things like that. And they're never absent of the purpose of God. We just need to find out what that is. Now, Esther didn't know what that was. And when the idea first came, but maybe it was her purpose of going to the king, she said, that's going to get me killed. And Mordecai says, you may think that you are okay in the palace. He says, and if you don't do something, God's going to bring about salvation for his people. Let me back up just a second, though. The deportation, the carrying off into exile, I think 580, something like that. If you look at so here's Nebuchadnezzar, taken captive. Here's a guy named Darius, and here's his son-in-law, Cyrus. You remember those names, Darius and Cyrus? Ezra, Nehemiah. They went back home, okay? Xerxes is Darius' son. Let me put this together. They had a chance to go home, back to the promised land, where God said he was going to reestablish them as his people. And if they obeyed him, he'd help them. A lot of the Jews didn't go home. They weren't supposed to be there in the first place. It doesn't matter. And I say that for this reason. Some of us I know, because I've been there, some of us I know have been tempted to think, because we didn't do what we should have done in the past, we're not worth anything to God now. That is a lie. That is authored by the gates of hell. It is not true. God is always redemptive, and the reason he gives us time is because he wants it to be time that redeems. He wants it to redeem more than just us. That's what Mordecai said to Esther. This isn't just about you, little girl. If you don't do something, God's going to get it done, but who knows? But for such a time as this, you have come to this spot. And so she says, okay, gather the people, fast and pray 3 days. Pray, and then I'll go in. And if I perish, I perish. She got it. She got the fact that though she didn't know how she got there or why she got there or what she's supposed to do when she was there, when it came time, she got it and she stepped up. That's what some of us need to hear. How we got here, how we failed before we got here, none of that makes a bit of difference. The issue is, who knows? But for such a time as this, God has put you in this gap. There's a space of time here. There's a space of time. And if you're on assignment, it's up to you. And God will never fail what he's authored. Look at it. Here's Moses. Grows up in Egypt. He's a prince of Egypt. It says in Hebrews, he was eloquent. He was educated in all the finer things. I mean, he knew how to run governments. God had prepared him to run something out there in the wilderness with a bunch of rowdies who didn't know left from right. And God revealed to him, you do it like this, but he knew how to run this machine. Well, sort of. At one point, he was running everything. He says, you got to have somebody else. His father told him, you got to put some other people in charge of things under you, wearing yourself out. That's dumb, don't do that. But he'd grown up in Egypt where Pharaoh did everything. Of course, he was sort of God. Moses God had a son with him, Moses, you're not God. When Moses was there, he was not unprepared. It included his last 40 years in the wilderness, where nobody's looking, nobody's watching, and we have no indication that God was talking. We have no indication that anything was happening. But all those times where things are very quiet, God's busy. Either working something in us or working circumstances around us that we may not have known where it was going or why until one day you wake up in the palace and the word is out there that your people are in trouble and you need to go stand in the gap. So somebody's in the hospital and you just know, Lord, what? Give us time. Make a gap available for a purpose. That somebody could know you that doesn't know you now. And we're here to ask you for that, and we're asking for an opportunity to declare his love into that situation. And I suspect if any one of us would think of it, we know people, God wants us to stand in the gap. I'm going to just pause a bit and ask y'all to do something that may be strange. By the way, churches are not used to having comfortable, quiet times. We fill it from end to end. That's why you have a bulletin. You know why you have an order of service? So God can't interrupt church on Sunday morning. You got a plan. You know where it comes next. We don't stop. We don't have a quiet time. I'm going to take a little quiet time right now. I want you to close your eyes and ask God to show you if there's somebody that's on your heart for whom He wants you to stand in the gap and intercede for a grace time in their life. And say it again. I just want to ask God to show us if there's somebody He's asking us in prayer to stand in the gap. I'll give you a picture. There's a time where Israel disobeyed God, and Moses says, "Oh God, don't do that." And it says God forgave Israel because Moses interceded. That's not just about Moses. This is a type. I believe there was a whole generation from the cross until the destruction of Jerusalem. The Jews have said, "Let His blood be upon us and our children." And God left some people in Jerusalem. There was 40 years before the judgment came on the city. That was an invitation to anybody willing to hear it. To hear the Jews who believe say to the city what Jesus has already said as well. So let me pray for all of us. Heavenly Father, you have purpose from the beginning of time to call out, "Adam, where are you?" And each one of our lives, Lord, I believe Adam has a name. And I don't know what that name is, but I do know that when you place us in a position that we didn't realize, didn't choose, didn't know, you place us in a position of intercession for somebody else for a purpose. And when there's time given, it's always for a purpose. You do that. You're the Lord of time. You can turn back the sun. For Hezekiah, you stopped the sun and told him he was going to have 15 more years. And at the end of that time, Hezekiah thought, well, at least there will be peace in my lifetime, even though there was a pronounced judgment coming. Lord, let us not disregard what's happening in our time and ignore the times that are coming in the future, where there will be no choice for people to turn to know you. It's given for man once to die, and then comes the judgment. So Lord, if there are people that we know who need time, stir in our hearts a passionate prayer on their behalf that you would give time. Amen. Any thoughts they may have that they'd like to share with that message?
Do you feel that sometimes we witness better by not saying anything? And by the things we do that are light to others?
The question is, do I believe that sometimes Lord witnesses without us saying a word? Two responses, several. One is, you can say the wrong thing and really mess it up. Especially if what you're saying is like this. That indicates, I think I'm okay and you're not. Shame on you. So that we need not say that word. And if we say something that represents God, but our life doesn't evidence that, that isn't good either. You know, if you're standing there with a frown and you're facing a rock in your hand, they're going to have a hard time believing that you like them. Okay? So our lives and our words need to be consistent. But I would hesitate to divide them ever. Who was the saint who said, always preach the gospel and when necessary use words? I think that was that Francis? Cece? I forgot, one of the saints of old. And that's been quoted often to give me permission just to live a good Christian life and not say the words. But 1 Peter 2 said, sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to give an account of the hope that's in you to those who ask, yet with gentleness and reverence. So the reason to live a godly life is that it positions you in a way to be seen by those who wonder how you live the way you do, and when they ask, you have something to tell them. That doesn't just give a permission to just go live and never say anything. It means you need to live in a way that demonstrates the presence of Christ. And that when that happens, and others ask, then you need to be ready. There's probably a risk that some of us have aborted the process and spoken too soon. But more of us have taught our unsaved friends that Jesus isn't important enough to us because we've never told them about him. I've heard unsaved people say that about somebody who knew the Lord all their life. Somebody else told them about Jesus, and they told them about it, they accepted it, and they said to the saved person, why didn't you tell me? Because they discovered something true and valuable and real, and you were their friend, and you were a Christian, you never told them about it. So, asking the Lord to show us, I believe that when we start praying for somebody, your antenna will start going up to what to say and when to say it. I think without praying for them, it's an easy way to use living and not speaking as an excuse. And I hope I don't offend anybody. Well, yeah, I hope I do offend anybody who thinks that. Because it's wrong thinking. So don't ever use it as an excuse, but yes, there are times where we need to hedge our words. Yeah. But when we're told to not speak, the Lord's prompting us to do something. So if we don't speak and we don't pray, then we should have done probably one or the other, or both. Does that kind of answer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other questions somebody has? After we get off of FaceTime Live, I want to share something with you that I'm going to broadcast to everybody around the world. Who goes have any thoughts? I want you to think about this issue of the gap. The picture again I have is Nineveh and Jonah. 40 days. If God's objective was to destroy the city, he could have done that. He could have done that at the drop of a hat. Okay? The other picture that comes to my mind is when God's heading towards Sodom. He says, I've heard that it stinks to high heaven. I'm going to bring judgment on the city. And remember Abraham's plea? Oh, Lord, let it not be said that the judge of all the earth would destroy a city for a lack of, starts whittling down, 50, 40, 30, forsaken 10.
Yeah.
He said, okay, if I find 10 righteous people, I want to destroy the city. Ezekiel, God cannot say today what he said to Ezekiel. Because what he said to Ezekiel was, I look for someone, anyone, to stand in the gap so I wouldn't destroy the land, and I couldn't find any. There are people who are gathering all of this nation, sometimes every day. There are people around the world praying for America every day, that God will extend grace to us. There are people in the country who are gathering together. I have the privilege of chairing the National Day of Prayer at Sugarland Town Center on the first Thursday of May every year. I've been there for several years now. And that is the time of prayer. About 50 minutes out of the hour, we're just praying for different areas of our local community and for our nation. There are people standing in the gap for America. And many of them are realizing that God's goal for America is not to judge it. And there's some prophets of doom who talk about, I've heard somebody said, if God doesn't judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom. That's stupid. It doesn't understand the heart of God. Because it portrays God as a God of judgment. You'll get that guy because he deserves to be judged. No, when we get it, that I deserve to be judged as much as anybody breathing, then we're praying like Daniel, Lord, forgive us our sins. Daniel wasn't the reason why they were in captivity. There was somebody before him, but he stood on equal ground. Ezra and Nehemiah, praise, forgive us and the sins of our fathers and us. We have sinned. We weren't even there, but when we understand that we are as much in the need of the grace of God as the person for whom we're praying, then we're probably praying a prayer of mercy that God's going to hear and God can heal the land. There are people like that praying for our country. I rejoice in that. God cannot say about America what he said to Ezekiel. I can't imagine quite the people of God being in that place where God said, y'all look for somebody who cried out for mercy for the land. I couldn't find anybody. There's a difference, though, between a lot of people who are praying for mercy for our country and those who are praying down judgment on America because of the darkness of America. That's not God's heart. God's heart gives an extended period of time. He keeps a window open for the sake of people who are willing to stand in the gap and intercede for the country. And so he says, I pray when you come together that you lift up prayers, intercessions, and petitions on behalf of all men, especially on behalf of kings and all who are in authority, that you might live your lives peacefully in order. That's part of God's plan. God wants us to live in peace, not without conflict. Let me clarify that. He wants our lives to be peaceably and in order. That does not mean we're conflict-free. It does not mean that there's not a storm chasing us down. It means our position in the storm is anchored. Read Acts 27 one time. That's where Paul heads off for home. He's on this boat, and this storm breaks out. I mean, this is a 3-day nightmare. They would throw the tackle overboard, and it said, slowly, hope was eroded away, and they gave up hope, and they prayed for the sunrise. Oh, except Paul, because why? Paul had been told by God he was going to testify before Caesar. So he knew it was going to be okay. He knew he was going to come through it. And because of Paul, everybody on board was kept safe. This was a prison ship, by the way. And so when the ship's coming apart, the Roman soldiers said, okay, if we let prisoners go, it's going to be our heads. They're going to kill all the prisoners. Paul said, no. There's going to be no loss of life. Even when the storm hits, it prepares us in that situation to be the presence of God in the storm so that all on board may be saved and do it or not. Can you imagine the revival that went on when they got to shore? Here's guys who had been to the edge of death and gave up hope of living. And because this guy on board said, God's told me everybody is going to make it. We get shore and get dried off, I'll bet you hearts were turned. When the wheels come flying off of our culture, we'll find out those who will be willing to turn, who right now are snubbing their nose at God or even shaking their fist in the sky. There's a difference between being angry and being hopeless. A lot of anger in our land, but we haven't reached the point of hopelessness. And when it comes to a time of hopelessness, God wants us to raise up the banner of hope. Those who know that there's life beyond the storm, and our God is the God of hope. Am I looking forward to that? Do I look nuts? Yeah. And all through history, the people had hope, or sometimes called the originary names, whatever that may be, been different over different times. But we're a people of hope. Yeah. In the history of Christian art, the ark, the boat, has always been a symbol of the church and of hope. Yeah. In the Chinese language, the The picture word for flood is a boat with 8 people on it. Did you know that? Yeah. The record of God's behavior in the world that gives hope to 8 people through a storm, written in the Chinese language. I just think that's kind of cool. When you get your eyes open, you start seeing things that otherwise you might not know. And so I'll be praying for all of us. God's been speaking this to me. Monique, can you turn that thing off? Goodbye, Facebook Live.
I'm so sorry.
God bless you. That's right. Yeah. Next door over here at